Hello and welcome to episode 7. So the central theme of this expert series has of course been buying property in Spain, and hand in hand with that is getting to grips with the Spanish language. Now, I've spoken to buyers that are fluent, I've spoken to buyers who don't know a word. So how important is it to know the language, and how easy is it to learn Spanish? Well, to answer those questions, I would like to welcome back to the podcast James Blick, founder of YouTube channel Spain Revealed and co-founder of Devour Tours. James, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Beth. Great to be back.
Lovely to chat to you.
Yeah.
And we spoke in episode 1 of this series, but just give us a brief reminder, what is Spain Revealed and what is your history and your journey with Spain?
Cool. So yeah, Spain Revealed is, as you mentioned, a YouTube channel that's really just about helping people experience Spain authentically, whether that's traveling here or moving here. It's something that was a pet project a few years back, but has really grown into quite a big brand now. And it's something I love doing. Devour Tours is another thing I'm involved in, which is a food tour company I co-founded. And we run food tours to take people and show them the best places to eat in various cities in Spain and Europe. And I'm about to launch my Move to Spain Masterclass, which is an 8-week course to really help people to move to Spain, go through all the crazy stuff of visas and healthcare and property and all that sort of stuff.
Incredible. And I think it will be so useful. And so the reason why you end up in Spain is because of your wife. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, that is true. I went to France to meet French women and I met a Spaniard. So not really. Well, I did meet a Spaniard, but I was in love. I'm from New Zealand. So I was in love with the idea of a European dream, and moved to France because it was a language I'd learned. Actually, speaking about language, I had never had any really real contact with the Spanish language. So France made sense. But then, met my wife, my now wife, who's from Madrid, in Toulouse in southern France. And actually, we spoke French for the first year because she wasn't confident with her English and I didn't speak Spanish. And then we switched to English. So then we stick to English, and now we do a mixture of Spanish and English. It's very confusing.
Wow.
When we live here in Madrid.
Oh, amazing, though, to have so many languages. I think, you find a common tongue, which for you guys was French, but then you can just build from there. So, Okay, let's go back to them then, because I'm really interested. You came to Europe with French, no Spanish, and then you meet your Spanish wife. And how does that progress? What did you decide to do from that moment when you were like, oh God, I'm going to have to learn Spanish, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think French helps a little bit with Spanish. When you're an English speaker, there's obviously certain languages you can learn that have things in common, and so French gave me a little bit of a foot up in that way. We actually met in France, and then we lived in New Zealand together for 4 years. And so during that time, we were speaking English. But then it became clear that we decided we wanted to move to Spain. We came here 10 years ago. And so in New Zealand, I started to get a little bit more intentional about learning Spanish. But really, when we hit Spain, my Spanish was really weak. It's just been a journey ever since. I've never taken Spanish language classes. It's always been just living here and doing it and working in Spanish, giving tours, talking to the tapas bar owners in Spanish and learning in that way. But it's never been a kind of an academic thing for me, rightly or wrongly.
I think what you had was you had it at home, right? You were kind of talking, and so you never needed the academic structure of, I think, discipline. I think discipline is what the academic structure provides, and actually you had that on a day-to-day basis anyway. Yeah. Do you think for you, was it practice or was it a kind of mindset thing? And as soon as you had the intention to learn it, like, I'm just trying to think, where does the drive to learn a language come from, and what is important in trying to progress that?
I think that's a really good word, the drive, because if you haven't got that, it's not going to come from anywhere. So even going back to French, obviously I was in a relationship with a Spanish person moving to Spain. So there's a drive and there's a necessity. But when I was thinking back to learning French, my drive was just sort of the passion for this culture, my curiosity about it. Learning a language is really about learning a culture. And I think if you weren't really interested in the culture, I guess it would be hard to have that drive. I guess maybe if you were working in a business context with people from a certain country, then, if you're working with people in China, then you could have that drive as well. So I think you do need something apart from the language to really keep propelling you forward. Otherwise, because it's not easy. It's very hard to learn a language as an adult, as babies and, as bilingual people in the world, they're like sponges. Their brains are ready to learn those two languages at the same time. But, what is it? By age 21, our brains are atrophying already. So it's like...
It is interesting how easy it feels in school, especially the early days of school. And of course, children just picking up language for the first time in whatever their mother tongue is.
Yeah.
You are amazingly pliable and you absorb so much, but it does feel like a slog as an adult.
It does. Well, I think it's interesting when we think of people moving to Spain with family, with kids. There's always that thing, do I put them into a local school or I put them into an international school? If they're, I don't know what the age would be. You have to look at your individual children, but if they're under, say, 7 or 8, then they will pick up that language in a local school. But if they're already 15, it might be a bit late and it might be too hard and they have to go to that school where it's mainly in English, for example.
Yeah, totally. And I'm just thinking of the similarities because there are certain languages, obviously kind of Germanic in origin, or when it came to French and Spanish, you said there was a nice amount of overlap.
Yeah.
Between English and Spanish, however, I'm just thinking about what are the central differences. It's quite a big question because there's a lot, right? Their origin is very different. For you, were there any standouts that you were kind of like, oh God, okay, I'm going to have to get my head around that. That's really different.
Between learning Spanish, between English and Spanish.
Yeah.
I think what's been a struggle for me always, and, although I have learned in a very organic way, I would like to do more, and I maybe should have done more academic to at least accompany it, even if it's just my own reading, because I think you can accelerate your learning. I think you have to do both. You have to have the academic and the organic, so that, one of the differences, one of the things that sometimes has always tripped me up in Spanish is a lot of little things around sort of sentence construction that you can kind of get away with in an organic context because you can communicate. But I've always struggled with some of those details that I would have learned in a more academic context. And it's just, little words that when we're speaking English, like, how is it that, all those kind of constructions, how is it that this happens and that happens? And sometimes you're like, how do I do that? And so sometimes when you're, I've found that those little things are harder. Like the vocab is pretty good, unless it's a topic that's totally out of, but it's a lot of those little kind of things of getting it right that separates you from just someone sort of kind of getting it right to someone actually really speaking correctly. And when you don't feel like you're speaking fully correctly, it can hit your confidence in the way you present. I think the other thing is we use it in English. We're not aware of it, like in so many things we use in a language, but we don't use it as much as the subjunctive tense, which is... it's actually always is just classically hard. It's not as hard as it seems. I was actually just the other day, I was thinking I need to kind of get better at this. And so I was just actually watched some YouTube videos that kind of helped break it down. And just in 10 minutes, it just went from that to that, which was, the need to kind of pinpoint certain weaknesses in my language and do some academic work around them. So I think the little things were always hard, but everyone has a different struggle, whether it's accent. Accent's never been hard for me. For some people, they speak Spanish and they sound like an English person,
How did you find, you said that accent was never a problem for you, but how have you found the confidence aspect of it?
That's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. The accent is a real key that I've always felt really comfortable with. And it's just some people are more comfortable with that than others. And so it sounds like, so even early on in being in Spain, it sounds like I'm better at Spanish than I was at that time, because people use your accent as a judge of how well you speak. And so I've had examples, I think I might have said this on the other podcast we were on, of, somebody calls and they're like, and you say 4 words and like, oh my God, your Spanish is amazing. It's like, I actually haven't said anything yet. I just said it with a good accent.
Well, and the confidence, right? And just the kind of bravado that you need with a good accent to really just throw yourself in.
It is true. But then if there's certain sentence constructions that I feel like are going to trip me up a little bit, I can almost feel myself speaking more quietly or holding back a little bit or not speaking as clearly. And, and that's always a shame when you kind of feel like you're not presenting as who you are. My wife and I always have a joke that it's like, who you are, what the language you speak really is connected to who you are. So we'll sit down to dinner sometimes and we're speaking in Spanish because we really do mix it up. It's like 50-50. And sometimes she'll say, hey, can we just have tonight in English? Because she maybe wants to practice her English, but also kind of who I am with her is a little bit different. I
Mm.
will have a different sense of humor, or maybe I'm funnier in English because I've spent
Oh,
all
that's
my
so
time in English compared
interesting.
to
Yeah.
Spanish. And so she will kind of request, can we do tonight in English, and I'll say, hey, can we do some Spanish? Can we make sure, today's in Spanish because we've been using a lot of English lately. And so it really does change who you are, and that can shift not only your confidence, but how you are to the world. I used to say to her, like, do your friends realize like who I actually am? They're just seeing this kind of shadow version of me, particularly in the early years when my Spanish wasn't strong.
So for you guys, the friends that you have made since being
Mm,
in Spain, are
yeah.
they Spanish? Are they English? Are they French? Are they something else again? How's it worked for you?
It's a real mix. So my wife has friends here that she had at university that obviously some of them are still living in Madrid. So those are our friends that were originally her friends. And obviously their partners and their families have become, friends of ours. There's also friends that I have made, which are a mixture of Spanish people, but also people, say, from the UK or the US, or work colleagues. And then there are relationships that we have with couples where he is Spanish and she's English, or vice versa.
Interesting.
So there's a real it's interesting. You actually walk into each, if it's a dinner, it's like, oh, this is how we do this. Like with this couple, we speak Spanish, or this couple, we speak English. And so, but then even then, as a couple, we speak one language. But then if, at the table, I'm then speaking to the English guy of the couple, then we'll just switch back into English. So it is quite a fluid thing.
I think it's
How
so
we interact.
amazing. It's so amazing to be able to do it. I'm in awe of people who can fluently speak.
It
I
doesn't
mean,
feel amazing. It feels like you're just fumbling around, but yeah, it's
but speaking multiple languages, do you think
Mm,
it's been easier to learn a second language? Because my dad speaks multiple languages, and he's said,
mm.
the first one's the hardest, and then your brain kind of gets very used to it. And this is how polyglots exist, right? Who speak 8 different languages, or every language, or whatever it is.
I guess so. I wonder how much of your father, though, was also learning a lot of the kind of the rules. In a sense, a language is full of rules, and then a bunch of those rules get broken half the time. But if you, again, that academic piece, if you can kind of get the 10 common rules, you can really accelerate your learning, and you can apply that to other languages. So the minute you understand how the subjunctive works in French, then you understand how the subjunctive works in Spanish.
Yeah.
So I think it does help because I think when you learn a language, you think about your own language more deeply. We learn we learn English in our case as babies, but we don't, depending on what we studied or what the kind of education system was like when we went through school. There were, I kind of learned what verbs were, but I remember speaking to people who were a little younger than me in New Zealand who didn't understand the concept of a verb because education had shifted for a period and they didn't really talk about that sort of stuff, and people didn't know what a noun or an adjective was. But I went through a phase where I do understand those things. So I think it really depends on like how much do you understand your own language, so that when you learn another one, it's like, is that a noun? You already understand how language is structured.
Yeah, totally. And whether you enjoy it, because I always
Mm,
loved English and I liked
yeah,
learning all of those rules. If you don't like
yeah,
those rules, it might just be that you're much more conversational than you are going to be written, or whatever it is. I
yeah.
think there's room for everyone when it comes to
Mm,
learning languages, but you're right when you say it's a set of rules, and certain people love learning things like that, and certain people don't. So
yeah.
I mean, we've covered loads of hints and tips, but confidence is definitely one. Rules and learning those and then applying those, knowing your own language pretty well, is
Yeah.
definitely one. Any other hints and tips?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned about myself as a learner is that I'm a visual learner. I need to see a word to grasp it. I could hear a word a million times, but until I see it, it's like, oh, that's what that word is. And so I think each person really needs to think through, and we may not realize because we've never had to learn language. But once you just start using different tools, whether it's music, my wife always used a lot of music with English. She's a really oral learner. But it's like, it doesn't solidify for me a word until I see it. And so, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't also listen to it, but I need to see it. And so I think if once you start learning with different inputs, with reading, speaking, writing, hearing, then you can see like, what is the one that really solidifies that understanding for me? And once you identify that, you double down on that one. For me, it's like, I need to keep up with reading. I can't just I can't just listen to podcasts in Spanish or just speak when I'm jogging or something like that. I need to read
Totally.
books.
Whereas some people will listen to it as they fall asleep, and
Mhm.
actually hearing it is what goes into their brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's really, really interesting. Do you need to see a picture as well as the word when you say you're a visual learner? Like,
No, I just
just
need
the
to see
word?
the word. I need to see the word. And Spanish is great because in seeing the word, you know exactly how it sounds. It's a really easy language in that sense. It's not like English, which must be a nightmare when we say like listen and there's a T in there.
Oh gosh, so many things in English. I really feel for people. And
Thorough,
yet,
through,
everyone, but I always feel when I go on holiday, like their English is so much better than my Spanish or my
Well, it
French or
has to
whatever
be,
language
right?
it
If they
is.
want to work internationally, they're kind of cornered into English, whereas we learn these languages. It feels like sometimes out of a desire to live somewhere else or experience a culture. But it is for us, I think, harder because you can go so many places in the world and get by with English. There will always, and that is actually a trap when you're, say, moving to Spain.
Yeah.
And you have to be really intentional about limiting your exposure to English speakers, because literally we always go to the follow the path of least resistance. It's normal. You move to a new country, you're feeling nervous, you're feeling insecure. You just want to hang out with your friends and drink a beer and talk in English, but you got to keep it up.
Yeah, and push through it and kind of try to be quite strict with yourself, I think,
Yeah.
with how much you're going to allow yourself to
Yeah.
rest on your English. I wanted to ask, though, how welcome is it to be there and not be very good at Spanish? Does it feel like quite a safe environment to fail?
Totally. Yeah. I think the Spanish people are very surprised. It almost feels like that, you could just have a little bit and they will not surprised, but they will be appreciative of it. Because I guess there's, each person that you interact with and you do your best. There might have been 5 other people that sort of fumbled through and just actually literally spoke only English to them if you were talking to, the guy behind the bar or something like that. So the fact that you're making an effort is probably good compared to a lot of people who just didn't make an effort. So I think, we always hear, I think the cliche is like, if you're in France, they'll, if your French isn't perfect, they'll be critiqued and things like that. I don't know if that's true. I didn't sort of find that as such, but in Spain, people will be really forgiving and they won't sort of do one of those things where they sort of speak back to you in English. That hardly ever happens. And if it does happen, it usually means that person is kind of pretentious.
Okay. All right. Good rule. So what do you think of things like Duolingo and the famous language learning apps that are quite different than the old style of the way of learning languages, but probably very geared up to your way of learning, which would be seeing it, hearing it. They do have a picture as well, which I like. But what do you think of that?
Yeah, it's funny. Duolingo, I actually only started trying that so I could help kind of give better advice for people who ask questions like this. I started using Duolingo about a year ago. I'd never used any apps. And I think the success of Duolingo is more around how they've managed to gamify it rather than I'm not convinced that it's this wonderful learning tool. What I found challenging is that you can make best guesses and get it right. And then, but I'm not sure how much you're actually learning within that best guess. So it's like, you're not actually having to write the word. I think maybe you have to write, but it's a lot of like, pick this one or things like that. And so I find that, I think it feels like you're learning more than maybe you're learning. That was just my experience with it. But of course I wasn't using it as a really fresh, like, wow, I'm just starting. Another one I've used is Rosetta Stone, which is like the granddaddy of language learning computer tools now online. And I found that quite good because it's only in Spanish. And I think that forces you a little more to be uncomfortable. Learning a language is uncomfortable. It's not easy. And I wonder if Duolingo, for example, kind of has created this thing that's a little too easy. But I think that with all of these tools, you've got to use a lot of them in conjunction. There's not one tool that does the trick. So, you might use Rosetta, you might use Duolingo and have live speaking classes and things like that.
I think it's interesting what you say about it being too easy. They clearly want you to log in every day and play every day, right? You've got your day streak on Duolingo, which I loved, and then I lost a 133-day streak, and I was like, right, I'm out, I'm done. But I think you're totally right. It lulls you into gosh, I'm making progress so fast. And actually, language learning is slow. Yeah.
And how do you test that progress in a real world scenario? So I wonder if, what I quite liked about Rosetta is that it actually had speech recognition as well. So, you could put yourself in those shoes. So I think there's a lot of different tools out there. And I mean, I get emails all the time. There's a new tool, there's a new app. And I think it's worth diving in and using them. But I would just be aware of like, how much progress am I actually making? Could I walk into this place and have this conversation? Because really that's what you're supposed to be able to do. Like the first thing generally most people want to be able to do is to speak. But a lot of these apps is like, it's teaching you to recognize a word or or understand what word might go in quite an artificial context.
Yeah.
So there's some building blocks there, but you have to be a little bit careful, I think. Because as you say, it would not be a good business if it was not easy, if it was there was a lot of friction. But
this is what I mean. If it challenged you. Yeah,
Yeah.
Totally. I remember learning, you have a beautiful duck and thinking, that's not very helpful, really, actually, what I've learned
No.
there. But it is funny, the random phrases that come up. So speaking of random phrases, probably not that one, but what did you find really useful to begin with? Are there any kind of useful phrases you can give me?
Yeah, I think, what did I find? Just, it sounds basic, but being able to present yourself, being able to, say who you are, hola, ¿qué tal? Me llamo James, soy de Nueva Zelanda, where I'm from. I think also having some starters for people. Like in Spain, we don't talk so much about work, for example. That's more, maybe in New Zealand, we would say, what work do you do? But it's a legitimate question. So, ¿en qué trabajas? What do you do? So that not just sort of suddenly presenting things, but almost if you can ask a question, it takes a little pressure off because suddenly you've kind of got some rhythm going rather than just like, hi, my name's James and things like that. So I think a question like that, what do you do? Or ¿dónde vives? Where do you live? It can help you kind of, even though they might seem a little bit banal, then at least there's a sense of a conversation. Because I think one of the traps when you're learning a language and you're entering into conversations is you feel like you're a drain on the vibe of the conversation. You're the weakest link. And so I think if you can have some go-to things that you can ask people, it's like, well, at least I feel like I'm showing interest in them, which people like. I think that's key. I think other ones is just, particularly in Spain, everybody wants to go and eat in a tapas bar and have that experience. And so I think, like, again, that first phrase that you can get in there, and, ponme una caña, por favor, can I have a beer or una cerveza? I think then you can kind of like chill out. You've ordered a drink. You're not just going to be standing there weirdly looking at the bartender and they're like, what do you want? So get a drink. Then you've got a drink, which will relax you more. And you can chill out. You could spend half an hour drinking that drink while you figure out the menu situation. So I think that's a good one.
I think so much of this is like just trying to feel comfortable and just not worrying too much that you're messing up or you're ruining a conversation or you look weird in a bar. Like so much of it comes with self-confidence and just being like, okay, I'm just going to take it one thing at a time. Yeah.
And I think if you have that like launching pad phrase, then at least you have the confidence that you said that, you achieved something, you got a drink, and then you can kind of fumble through from there. But to have that first step, I think is really important.
I was just thinking Meetup is another app that people use in the UK to come together and have language learning groups. Is that something that is in Spain or is there a similar thing?
Meetup is in Spain. Yeah, it's quite a popular thing here. So, and you can use Meetup obviously for anything like in the UK. So there's groups people who have moved here who will meet with people who are also immigrants or expats. But there's also people who would use it for conversation exchange, which a lot of people I know have always done that, both to meet their future spouse, but also to learn a language. So, you speak Spanish for half an hour and I'll speak English for half an hour. And I think those are really, really good.
Yeah, really nice. I mean, there's so many options with technology. It is amazing. So what about, I wanted to ask what you felt on, and again, it's probably going to be different for each individual, but books, TV, film. I know that a friend of mine learns by putting a Spanish film on and having the subtitles on. So the film is in Spanish and that's what he's hearing, but he's reading in English. Yeah. I don't know if that works so well for me, and I guess it is dependent on your learning style, but what are your thoughts on that as a method?
I've never used film, again, because of my learning method. I've never used film or TV shows as often. But I think I would probably, if I wasn't in Spain, I would use them more because what they do is they give you a great connection to the culture and help kind of fuel that drive as well as the language piece. There's a famous Spanish TV show in Spanish. It's called Casa de Papel, or I think it's called Money Heist in English. So kind of by watching that, you're going to hear some accents. Look, it's all taking place in a bank.
Really good.
It's really good.
That's the benefit.
And so I think there's another one called Elite or Elite, which is about, again, I've only seen it briefly, but I've spoken to friends in the States who love it. And I think it's some working class kids who go to this very expensive private school.
It's also really good. I'm quite into the,
so
the Spanish bit of Netflix. Yeah, it is a great way to immerse yourself in the language, I think.
I think that's it. So I've never quite been drawn because I'm immersed. I've got it all around me. It's everywhere. So for me, really, the reading has been key. I kind of have a rule, which I break constantly, which is, one book in English, one book in Spanish, one book in English, one book in Spanish.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But I think what's key when it comes to reading is you could sort of be like, I'm going to read a book in Spanish. Like here, I'm going to get Don Quixote, and it's like, you're never going to get through it. So read that one in English. But I think what I've found helpful is that I love murder mysteries. I love thrillers as a genre. And so for books, and so I will read those in Spanish because there's something that's going to keep me going is the fact that I love the genre. I'm not going to I think it would be a mistake, for example, if you're learning English, potentially to come and think, okay, I must read Jane Austen. And if it wasn't your genre, it's like, well, that's going to make it doubly hard. So make it something that you kind of are into. And also when it comes to reading, translations are good because they're generally, read a John Grisham in Spanish or something like that. They're generally simpler than something written originally in Spanish. So I think I've found that quite good as well.
I think that's the thing. Try and keep it fun for yourself, right? You don't have to change everything you enjoy because you're doing it in a different language. If you can apply as many things that you love to do at home into Spanish, great. Do that. I do sometimes think people are a bit rigid about it and they kind of have to learn one way, and actually our options are endless now with technology, but also just remembering what you like is a really good tip. And with the fun, I'm thinking, are there things like short courses or language retreats or things like that, like people tie meeting people and networking with language learning all at the same time and maybe go and immerse yourself in something like that?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, if you just Google in Spain, there's everything from private tutors, there's platforms to connecting with private tutors. There are language schools where you can do intensive courses. Just the other day, I was having a Google and there's like yoga and language retreat. There is everything. And I think, particularly in Spain, there's a lot of people who come here who want to learn Spanish. And so the offer has really grown massively over the last sort of 5 years or so. When I moved here, it wasn't quite like that. So you can find all kind of, wine tastings where you can drink wine and learn Spanish as well. There's a massive amount of things possible. So I think what then it comes down to is just making a judgment of, well, is this a quality course or is this a quality company? The Cervantes Institute does accredit certain courses, so that's always a good seal of quality, and just trying to look at making sure, I guess, that it fits that fun thing. Like, if you don't love yoga, don't do the yoga. And
it's not going to make learning the Spanish any easier.
It is not going to make it easier. But if you do love it, that's really going to propel you. So whether doing with yoga or not yoga is both can work. But if it's like, oh well, that would be amazing because I love that thing, or I love wine, then it's really going to be a great kind of piece of your toolkit. And I think learning a language is a toolkit. You can't download Duolingo and think that you've cracked it. You've got to bring all these different inputs, focusing a little bit on how you learn best, but do some one-on-one conversation classes, do your yoga, do your wine tasting thing in Spanish, do this, do that, watch the movie. And that's the only way really to do it, I think.
I feel like with the wine tasting, the more wine you drink, the easier it's going to be.
And that's true. And the inhibitions go down and suddenly you're like, wow, I had a conversation with someone yesterday. I don't remember it, but I'm sure it was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask just specifically about your YouTube channel and the viewers that you get, the comments that you get on that, but also the people that you engage with, probably more pre-COVID, where you could actually engage closely with people. But what is the viewership generally English?
So it is generally English speakers. It's a mixture of people from the States, from UK, from Australia, generally people looking to kind of learn about Spain or plan a trip here. But there is a big chunk of people who are from Spain, who are Spaniards, who watch the channel, I think, out of curiosity on the one hand, like, what does this foreigner think of our culture? You know, what's his outside view of it? But on the other hand, there's a lot of people who watch it to practice their English. Again, it's one of their inputs. And, you know, maybe they live. We actually, through our company, we used to offer wine tastings in English. And we would find that a big chunk of people were Spaniards who are like, you know, I used to live in London and I really want to keep my English going. So I come to these because it's fun. Plus, also, it's a great way to practice my English. So I think a lot of people do that. And, you know, they're watching a guy going around eating in their city, but speaking in a different language. And I think that can be interesting.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And just another tool that people can use. Of the English viewers, do you think people are interested in learning the language? When people want to come here, do you think learning the language is high on their priority list?
So I think I think a lot of people, and I was in this boat as well, think that I'll learn it when I get there. You know, it's like, of course, I'll be in Spain. I'll learn Spanish. It's going to be great, which is also a bit of a way of deep down, they probably know it's going to be hard and sort of pushing it off.
Down the road.
Kick it down the road a little bit. And I would say, you know, I think when people move here, they get very naturally caught up in some of the black and white stuff, or the things that are more black and white, which are about, you know, visas and property and all that stuff is achievable. But it's actually the other stuff that will kind of impact more on your experience, which is, you know, have you been, while you were thinking about moving here for 2 years, were you studying the language? Because if you were, wow, your experience is going to be much better once you do get here, because you're not going to be starting from zero once you arrive. So if you're starting from zero once you arrive, then you are going to fall into those kind of expat groups because you have no other alternative. So I think it is. I think people think they're going to learn it. But my recommendation was start yesterday, start learning, because you're kind of putting money in the bank for the future when you're going to arrive here, and you'll have a fuller experience. You'll be able to more fully engage in that Spanish culture and lifestyle. That is your goal of moving here, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you're never going to get there and go, oh, I've done too much.
Yeah,
it's always going to be, oh, I've not done enough. So just do what you can, but the more the better, I think, in terms of preparation.
And I would forget the word fluent. People sometimes say to me, you know, Spanish people will say, oh, or English people, it's like, how long did it take you to become fluent? I will never be fluent in Spanish. Because I started learning effectively when I was 27. You would have to really work hard to consider yourself fluent. I think, I don't know if fluent in the end is a technical term or not. Obviously, if you're born into a language, you are fluent, but I'm not working to achieve fluency. I'm working to achieve confidence, the ability to be who I believe I am in Spanish, as close as possible to who I believe I am, to tell some jokes, to be able to just, you know, have that conversation and yeah, almost like be as interesting as I think I am in Spanish as I am in English, or be the full me. That's really my goal. And so if I have a moment of lack of confidence, or if there's a conversation where there's certain terminology which is a bit challenging, then I've felt short of the goal that I've set for myself. You know?
I think that's a great measuring stick. I think and a sense of humor is classic. I hadn't ever thought of that, but actually when you can tell jokes in a different language and people get you, I think for me, that would be the moment where I'm like, oh, okay, I've made massive progress. So my final question then is, do you think you're there? You're not fluent, as you've explained, but are you on your own measuring stick? Have you achieved everything that you've wanted to achieve when it's come to mastering Spanish?
No, not at all. I mean, I think there's areas, again, a lot of those smaller areas of the language, those sort of connecting words and transitional words that, because I've never studied academically, I've still just never spent the time to really master them. And actually, that's something that I continually work on. Is like, hey, I think there's a weak area here. I can feel that when I'm speaking about this thing or in this way, I feel a little kind of like anxiety at this moment in a sentence. So what is that? What is that there? How can I learn? And usually it's actually really easy. And you realize, why didn't I do that 8 years ago? And why didn't I learn that little way of saying, that phrase 8 years ago, that little connecting word or connecting kind of grammatical piece of language. And usually you'll look it up and it'll be like, you'd be cooking and I'll watch a YouTube video while I'm cooking and it'll be like, there are 3 rules to how you use it. It's like, oh my God, it's so easy. When I start, and then you're good. And then you literally get 50% better at that thing straight away. And then you still have some issues, but yeah, so I'm sort of now being a bit more targeted, laser focused on certain areas of my language that are weak.
Good. Yeah, that's great advice. And so to recap your masterclass, are you going to cover things like language in that? Is that gonna feature? Where can people find that, just to end on, if they want to find more?
Yeah, we will cover that. One of the 8 modules, the last module is called Thrive, and it's how to thrive when you're in Spain, which is about the language and kind of getting into the culture and how you can not feel isolated when you get here. So the best place to go is spainrevealed.com. So that's our website, www.spainrevealed.com. Or if you search my name, James Blick, Blick, you'll find my Instagram and all these various areas, and you can find out more there.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much for talking us through it today,
Thanks,
James. It's lovely to see you.
Great. Bye-bye.